Diabetes Connections is brought to you by inhaled insulin. Fast in, fast out fits your lifestyle. By Omnipod 5, the only tubeless pump that integrates with Dexcom G6. And by Dexcom. Manage diabetes confidently and achieve real results with Dexcom G7, the powerfully simple CGM.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, we'll be talking about back to school before you know it. How do you explain type 1 diabetes to kids? I asked a preschool teacher whose daughter has T1D to talk about how to get the message across without scaring anybody.
It was the way to help to, number one, make Hannah feel more comfortable, but also to explain to these children why she would need to perhaps drink a juice box in the middle of class, or why she might not be feeling well in the middle of swim practice and might need to take a break.
That's Montessori teacher Laura Self. Her daughter Hannah was diagnosed at age 8 and is now 20. Laura has a great book for kids called Sweetie. We also talk about our kids who are both now young adults and what we think we did right to help them become confident and independent. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. I am always so glad to have you here. You know we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. It is almost time for back to school, which, depending on what part of the country you're listening in, it's either completely bonkers, looking at you, Northeast, or it's right on target. Here in the South, a lot of schools are going to go back in the next week or two. In parts of the Southwest, they are already back. So it's never too soon to talk about explaining diabetes to kids. And I was excited to talk to Laura, who is a friend of mine, because not only has she done this for her own daughter, but she is a preschool teacher. She's a Montessori teacher. So I knew when I heard about her book, which is called Sweetie, the story of a girl diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, that it would be written with an educator's eye and ear, right? She knows how to get a message across to kids. But like me, her daughter is grown up. Laura's daughter, Hannah, is about to be a senior in college. And as you'll hear, she just spent a semester abroad. I'm going to come back after the interview and talk a little bit about how that all went. Laura sent me some notes because we did this interview while she was still in Italy, but she did great. And Laura admits it was a very nerve-wracking experience for her, but they're really glad that, as Laura says, she was confidently able to live out her dreams without allowing T1D to get in the way. I love it. We are doing a giveaway on social media for Sweetie. That will be on the Diabetes Connections Facebook page and on my Instagram account. I'll also cross-post into the Diabetes Connections Facebook group. And if you are not on social media, it will be in the email newsletter that goes out every Tuesday. If you're not signed up for that, just go to diabetes-connections.com and scroll all the way down, and you will see a way to sign up. I don't spam you, but I do send a weekly email about the show and occasional other announcements when they're warranted. Quick note before we get started, if you've been thinking about registering for Mom's Night Out, we are coming to Frisco, Dallas, Texas, Providence, Rhode Island, and Charlotte, North Carolina in the next couple of months. Please note, early bird specials are going to run out. They stop at different times for different cities because, of course, the events are at different times. Frisco, the Dallas area, that's going to end first, and that will end in mid-August. So if you're thinking about registering, please do not delay. Head over to diabetes-connections.com, click on events. It'll take you right there. Okay, my interview with Laura Self right after this. I love when I don't have to deal with a faraway mail order system, when I can just pick up diabetes supplies from my pharmacy. Omnipod is the only tubeless full-feature insulin pump available through the pharmacy. It makes it simple to pick up pods and insulin in the same place, and you avoid high startup costs from traditional tubed insulin pumps. You simply pay as you pod. Remember, pharmacy means no commitment, and pharmacy means you can switch now, even if your tubed pump is under warranty. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Omnipod logo. For full safety, risk information, and free trial terms and conditions, visit omnipod.com/diabetesconnections. Laura, thanks so much for joining me. It's always fun to welcome a friend to the show. Thanks for jumping on.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't we just start off? Tell me your story. I've met Hannah, but she was diagnosed not at the age that you teach now, right? She was diagnosed in elementary school.
That's right. Hannah was diagnosed in the second grade at age 8. My background is I am a former traditional school teacher, and I'm now a Montessori preschool teacher. I'm the owner, director, and lead teacher at a school called Journey Montessori in Seal Creek in Charlotte. And I have the pleasure of teaching the young, very young children. But again, I used to teach elementary school. And even as a mom, I've always looked towards books to help take very abstract concepts and make them more concrete for children. And so it's always been a dream of mine to take this very challenging topic of being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and helping to make it a little more understandable for very young children. So I believe that the book is really helpful for preschool and elementary age children.
Yeah. Before we talk more about the book, what do you remember about Hannah's diagnosis? And how do you remember, again, with that, how do you remember explaining it to her?
Right. Well, obviously, it was a very scary time, a very confusing time. I can remember as soon as we did get that diagnosis and Hannah was in the hospital and she started receiving insulin, she started feeling amazing again. And her little personality returned, and she just absolutely had a ball in the craft room at the end of the hall. And she got to meet a Carolina Panthers player, and she was just, living it up at the hospital. And the better she started feeling, the worse I started feeling. And I remember at one time, I was the one that crawled into the hospital bed because I felt so overwhelmed. And I felt like I didn't know that I was going to be able to do this. And I didn't know how to understand it myself, much less try to explain it to her. But we very quickly realized that she thought at first that the finger pricks and the shots were just something she was going to have to do in the hospital, and didn't really realize that we were going to have to bring all this home with us and that this was now a part of her new life.
Oh, wow. When did that start sinking in?
That first night we were home for sure. Poor girl. But immediately I wanted to start to explain this. Hannah was diagnosed in the summer, I should say. And so we had a couple months at home with her before school started. And I felt the need to help to educate all of her friends, and then ultimately her classmates. And so I did find some books about children who were diagnosed with type 1. At the time, I bought every book I could possibly find on Amazon. I think at the time there were maybe 4, and invited friends over. And as a teacher does, did a little presentation, read a book. Hannah pricked her finger in front of her friends. We served a snack and counted the carbs together, all of the things that my own children know. I'm constantly making everything into a lesson. But to me, it was the way to help to, number one, make Hannah feel more comfortable, but also to explain to these children why she would need to perhaps drink a juice box in the middle of class, or why she might not be feeling well in the middle of swim practice and might need to take a break.
Well, that's what I want to talk to you about. I mean, we're laughing about, the teacher, but I think that's so valuable because many of us are kind of flummoxed at how to explain things. I'm sure you can imagine when Benny was diagnosed, I had no qualms about standing in front of the class, well, preschool class really, daycare, and saying, here's what's happening. But I'm not sure I'm not a teacher, right? Did I do the best job of educating? What are some ideas to share with parents who are thinking, I really should go to school, or how do I best explain this to my kids' friends?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I always say is that there's a part inside of Hannah's body that broke. It stopped working properly, called her pancreas. And because of that, she now needs to take medicine to help her feel better again. And sometimes she could get a little bit too much of the medicine, and that makes her not feel well. And sometimes she doesn't have enough of the medicine, and that also makes her feel sick. And so she's always kind of having to check and make sure that she knows exactly how much medicine. And of course, depending on the age of the child, you can introduce the word insulin that they have to feel her best. But I also am always very careful that when I'm speaking with a group of children, I don't really want to scare them. And I do kind of talk about sometimes some of the symptoms and that type of thing. But I always follow it up by saying, if you feel thirsty, does that mean that you have type 1 diabetes?
Yeah.
No. If you feel tired, does that mean that you have type 1 diabetes? No. This is something very rare that has happened. But it can happen to some people, but it doesn't often happen. I just don't want to scare anyone. And then the main point that I always want to talk about when sharing this with children is to be positive and say, does Hannah look like the same girl that you knew before she was diagnosed? And they, of course said yes.
Yeah.
And does she act the same as she always did before? Does she still like playing at the playground with you? Does she still like being on the swim team with you or being in dance class? Yes. All of those things have stayed the same. So this is still the same Hannah we've always known and loved. This is just something extra that she is having to take care of in her body, but it's still our Hannah. So I always want to make that point as well.
Do you remember over the years what kind of questions you've received about Hannah's diabetes or just kids in general talking about diabetes?
I think they always want to know, usually they want to know, does it hurt? Does that hurt when you prick your finger? Especially, of course, now she's on the CGM and we don't have to do finger pricks anymore. She doesn't have to endure them. But I think the pain was one thing that children seem to be interested about for sure.
Yeah, we got the question. I'm sure I got many more questions other than this one, but the one that always stands out in my mind was in first or second grade, one of the kids could not wait to ask me a question. He was like waving his arm around like kids do, And when I called on him, he said, "Can Benny still eat Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal?" I was like, that is a very specific, right, and passionate question. But I thought it was a great question because what they were really thinking, right, most of the kids are thinking is like, can Benny, as adults will ask us, right, can Benny eat sugar? Can Benny have real, can Benny have the foods he had before? That kind of thing. Right. I thought that was so funny.
It's very clever. They're very insightful.
Yeah. And when you're talking to preschoolers in particular, I know Hannah was 8, but, how would you change? You've already mentioned a couple of ways how you would change what you're saying, but I'm curious, like just for methods, and again, Laura, if you can't answer this is okay. But, for methods, for bigger picture ideas, for ways to parents to think about that rather than specifically, anything for us to keep in mind?
I think it's important to help them to understand that the insulin is medicine that helps our friend to feel better. And then you can compare that to, did you know that when you eat a piece of pizza that your body automatically knows how much insulin to give you? You also have insulin in your body and your body is doing it automatically. And this amazing device, this insulin pump, does it for Hannah. She just has to plug in a couple numbers and then she's also able to eat that piece of pizza and you can both enjoy it together.
As Hannah got older, and 8 is that great time for most kids when they are very open, willing to share, not too embarrassed about schlepping around the diabetes stuff. I assume how you all explained changed, right, in those preteen and teen and now young adult years. Can you talk a little bit about that? One of the hopes when Benny was diagnosed with diabetes was for a way to deliver mealtime insulin without injections. Well, there is a way to do that now. Afrezza is the only FDA-approved ultra-rapid-acting insulin. Once you breathe Afrezza into your lungs using the inhaler, insulin appears in your bloodstream in less than 1 minute, and it may start lowering blood sugar in about 12 minutes. You can be spontaneous but still in control without the need for injections at mealtime. Find out more, see if Afrezza is right for you. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Afrezza logo. Afrezza can cause serious side effects, including sudden lung problems and low potassium. It is not for patients with chronic lung disease such as asthma or COPD or for patients allergic to insulin. Tell your doctor if you ever smoked, have ever had kidney or liver problems, a history of lung cancer, or if you are pregnant or breastfeeding. Most common side effects are low blood sugar, cough, and sore throat. Severe low blood sugar can be fatal. Do not replace long-acting insulin with Afrezza. Afrezza is not for use to treat diabetic ketoacidosis. Please see full prescribing information, including boxed warning, medication guide, and instructions for use on Afrezza.com/safety. Now back to Laura, and we're talking about how you explain diabetes to kids changes as your child gets older.
Yes, I think maybe because she was diagnosed at age 8 and everyone knew about it and it wasn't a secret, and in our family, because we kind of presented it in this way, we didn't try to hide it. Hannah has never really gone through that phase where she has tried to hide it. And she's always been in the same house, in the same school system with the same, friend groups and that type of thing. Over the years, people have known her. And so it's just kind of been a known thing. However, when she went to college a couple of years ago, I think at first she wanted to maybe not have her devices on full display at first. Of course, she talked to her roommate and those, we made sure that there were safety protocols in place. But then she told me that she actually kind of regretted that. And her sophomore year, her sorority was doing Rush, and she made the conscious decision to have her pump on display, have her CGM on full display. And she was kind of hoping to perhaps make a connection with someone who might have type 1 or someone who might know someone who has type 1. And she came home from those Rush events. And of course, she had made several connections and was very excited about them and felt like that was the right decision to make, because she said it would have meant so much to her as a freshman when she was going through Rush if she had seen someone else in her same shoes.
Oh, that's great. That's really interesting. So let's talk about your book. What made you write Sweetie?
Well, again, I wanted to take an abstract concept and turn it into something more concrete. So one time I was at an amazing JDRF event listening to some very smart doctor and researcher explain the latest developments as far as research and technology and all of these things. And it was so interesting and also advanced and over my head. I felt like that I just kind of zoned out, and the idea for the book popped into my head, and I quickly grabbed a piece of paper and started writing right in the middle of that conference. And I think it was because I was looking for a way to make this information more simple. And I got the idea that I could write a story to be able to share with children. At that time, the books that I talked about buying for Hannah when she was first diagnosed would have been way out of date. They were kind of out of date when we first bought them. And so I really wanted to provide an updated one with updated technology, a Dexcom, and just a more hopeful story, not a scary story.
I don't want to take you too off topic here, but do you remember what books you guys read when she was diagnosed? Because those are like burned into my brain. I don't think I'll ever forget the diabetes books we read when Betty was little.
I do. There was one called Taking Diabetes to School. There was one called I Have a Secret.
Oh.
Yep. And it had real photographs in it. Those are the two that stand out in my mind right now.
We liked, we did Taking Diabetes to School for sure. And there was one called Jackie's Got Game, which was our favorite. I mean, these books some of them are out of print now, or they cost hundreds of dollars on Amazon. But Jackie's Got Game was all about a little boy who was at a basketball practice, and he had a tryout, will he make the team? And he has a low blood sugar during the game. And then, he does make the team, spoiler alert. But the team roster at the end, they show the team roster, and there's a boy named Benny, which is a kind of unusual name as far as I'm concerned. Usually it's Ben or Benjamin. So I was like, oh my gosh. So we must have read that book 5 million times. But these books really make a difference for people. So the book has recently come out, and we'll link up, of course, where people can get it. But has the reaction been? Anything surprise you that people have said?
I'm surprised that it has gotten such a warm welcome from children who are not type 1 diabetics. Yes, of course, I've really enjoyed reading it to type 1 children, and that has been a very special response. And I love being able to send it out to children who are newly diagnosed in particular and looking for a positive story that's going to help encourage them. But I've really enjoyed also reading it to groups of children who are not type 1s, but they can also relate. We talk a lot about how Sweetie might be going through having type 1 diabetes, but other people are going through having other things. And what are some ways that we can help them and be good friends? And there's a couple places in the book where Sweetie's friends help her out. And then I also really talk to them a lot about how Sweetie is smiling in the book at the end. She's been able to accomplish her goals and achieve her dreams, and type 1 diabetes has not stopped her. So that's a message that I want to share with all children.
I love how you call them friends. It's such a teacher thing. It just is making me smile on this side of the call. It's wonderful. Do you have any patented ways that you get your kids to pay attention to you? Like a 1, 2, 3 eyes on me, something we haven't heard?
The best way is to just start speaking very softly. And as soon as your voice drops, they immediately just quiet down. And they want to hang on every word. And then, of course, singing. As soon as I start singing, they join in.
Oh, that's so great. I love it.
Those are my favorite ways.
We're kind of all over the place with this interview, but I would like to ask you, you've mentioned Hannah's in college now. What was that transition like for both of you?
It was a little bit more complicated because she started college in 2020. And at first we weren't quite sure if she was going to be able to go to college. Everything was still kind of shut down. And she's at Clemson University, and they delayed it by 6 or 8 weeks, and that was devastating. So when she finally did get to go due to COVID, we were just so excited that she was going to have this normal experience as the world was kind of trying to get back to being on schedule. But of course, we had our normal fears. And this is, to me, one of the hardest things about being a parent of a type 1 diabetic is that every time they go through a milestone, you have fears. Of course, when your child gets a driver's license, you have fear of, are they going to be safe? When they go off to college, you have those fears. But then, of course, it's layered by the fears of, and are they going to keep good management of their health? And are the people around them going to know what to do if there's an emergency? And is she always going to have her needed supplies nearby? And all of those extra worries. Hannah's very open about talking to us and being open with her diagnosis. And so we did kind of have a plan in place for our family that we followed her on the Dexcom, and we kind of made some rules about when it would be appropriate to contact her and when it wouldn't. We had her roommate's phone number, those types of things made it better.
Good. That's great. I think a plan helps everybody, right? I mean, whether they're 2 years old and they have no idea what the plan is, or they're 20 years old and they're participating in it.
Absolutely. And Hannah said one thing she really appreciates too is that I always look for opportunities when I notice that her graph is like particularly looking terrific and looks like she's having a feeling good day, that I'll just send her a little message and say, I noticed that you're doing great and just want to compliment you. So she always appreciates that as well. Not just all the texts of, why are you high? Why are you low? What happened?
Right. It's so easy to fall into that.
Yeah.
It is. I was going to say it's such a sweet book. I'm sorry I didn't mean to put that in there, but it is a very, very sweet book. Do you have a favorite part about it? I mean, I know it's kind of hard to ask an author that.
Thank you. My favorite page is the very last page of the book. And on that page, Sweetie is celebrating her birthday and her family is around her, and she has a big smile on her face. And she has a whole table filled with food. Included in that display is a tray of cupcakes, and she is blowing out a candle on a cupcake, and it says something about how she is going to have her cake and eat it too. And that's my favorite page because so many times over the years we got the questions, oh, well, what is Hannah going to have while everyone else is having a cupcake? Or, can Hannah eat that? Should she be eating it? All of those questions. And of course, in our family, we have allowed Hannah to enjoy treats just as anyone else would. Of course, we don't eat cupcakes every night, and I wouldn't encourage anyone else to do that either. Type 1 diabetes or not. But I really like that page. And in fact, when I shared the book with the children at Camp Kudos and the teenage camp counselors were listening to me share it with them, and of course, they're all type 1 diabetics themselves, they were cheering, thank you for showing that type 1 diabetics can eat a cupcake. So that's my favorite page.
That is great. And I got to say, boy, you just brought me right back. Just like with the children's book, I just had a flash to when, it wasn't so much flash to when Benny at birthday parties when he was little, and the other parents not even so much asking like, oh, can you eat that? Because they knew, right, that we'd been doing this for so long. But there was always one parent who was giving you the side eye, like you're doing
Absolutely.
diabetes wrong. Like, what is wrong with you?
Right.
That's not how to do it.
Right.
And you want to say, like, you have no idea. He
No
just
idea.
expended so much energy at this bounce house place. He probably needs 4 cupcakes, lady.
Absolutely. Yes. It's hard for people to get their mind around it, but ultimately, it's going to be our decision. We're the ones who know the data, and we're the ones who go to the doctor's appointments, so we'll be making those decisions.
Absolutely. Any plans for a second book or any other plans for you and Hannah that you'd like to share?
The other book idea I have in my head is I would love to write a book about Sweetie Goes to Camp. Diabetes camp was such a huge part of Hannah's journey and such an important part of helping her to cope with her disease, to truly accept her disease fully, especially during those teenage years, to find a purpose in helping others, other younger children in particular, to achieve their best with type 1 diabetes as well, not letting it stand in the way. Hannah feels very strongly about that, and camp has been a huge part of that for her. So we think it would be fun if we did a Sweetie Goes to Camp.
I love
Sweetie
that
Goes to
idea.
Diabetes Camp.
I'm with you, definitely, or regular camp. I'll help you write that one.
Of course,
and I mentioned I mentioned we know each other. Obviously, we're friends. Let me give you the floor for a second to brag about Hannah, because you've already mentioned Camp Kudos, which is our local 3-day day camp, for little kids. And then, of course, we have our sleepaway camps here. I've got to assume she's been active as a teenager and a young adult. I've seen her around still, right, with the camps?
She is. She still works as a counselor at Camp Morris and Camp Kudos as well. She's done a lot of things with JDRF over the years, from being an ambassador to being a part of Children's Congress. Most recently, in college at Clemson, she did a full semester internship with the Greenville chapter of JDRF. And she's even helped start a CDN group at Clemson called Type 1 Tigers. And she runs different events with that group as well, continues to fundraise. So she's very passionate about promoting the message that type 1 is not going to be getting in her way. And she loves bonding with other type 1s, which is so comforting. When she's away, I know she's in a group chat with dozens of type 1s from Clemson. So if anybody needs anything, they're texting each other and they can handle it. So it's very helpful.
Yeah, that's great. And, CDN, the College Diabetes Network that you mentioned, you know what? I may have to reach out to Hannah, because it's been a long time since I've talked to a college student, and that would be a lot of fun.
Well, you're going to have to call her in Italy right now. She's studying abroad this semester, having a fabulous time in Florence, Italy, traveling all over. And yes, it was quite the challenge to get all of her needed medical supplies for the months that she's going to be there, and we got it all across the seas, and she's living her best life. I can definitely say that right now. She's enjoying every minute. We can't wait to go visit her during spring break.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So before I let you go, I know what I did to send Benny to Israel when he was 16 for a month. Can you share what you and Hannah, she's older, Benny was only 16 at the time. Can you share anything about how you all discussed and made a plan for that?
Yes. Again, thank goodness for Dexcom, because, we are able to follow her even across the ocean, which is encouraging. And she wants us to have that data. We told her and made a plan that she obviously needed to discuss it with her roommates. She didn't know any of her roommates until she landed over there and met them for the first time. So that was a day one conversation that she had. And then organizing the supplies, just keeping in check. What she's having a little bit of a challenge with right now is because the food is so different and she's eating in a different style. She did say she's been having a lot of lows. Again, that's another learning experience, and she's been positive about it. She's like, I just need to figure out how I'm going to get my protein over here, and I need to figure out the grocery store, even though everything, of course, is in Italian. And she's found some low snacks there that work for her, and she's making it all work.
I love that. Did you hesitate when she asked you to go abroad because of diabetes, or was there not a question?
We have never wanted diabetes to get in Hannah's way. And because she shares that same sentiment and she knows the responsibility of caring for her health and she embraces it, we had no qualms. And we felt that this was absolutely not going to be something to stand in her way. And so far, she's been there just a few weeks, but we're very impressed with how she is handling all of the challenges.
All right. So we've got Sweetie Goes to Camp, Sweetie Goes to Italy. We'll keep us posted. That's wonderful. Right. Laura, thank you so much for joining me. It was so much fun to talk to you. And, let us know when you start the next one.
Thank you so much for having me, Stacey. It was a pleasure.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
Lots more about Sweetie in the show notes. You can just go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the episode homepage. We also, as I mentioned, have that contest going on social media and in the newsletter. And I want to give you a quick update about Hannah. As I mentioned, we did this interview while she was still abroad. And I asked Laura to give me an update. So she says, quote, "Hello, Hannah's semester abroad went extremely well. She spent 4 months living and studying in Italy and traveling to various cities and countries all over Europe each weekend. She gained even more confidence in her diabetes management, although it was certainly challenging at times. Her biggest obstacle was adjusting for the food in Italy. Everything is fresh, contains much less sugar, is overall less processed than in the US, and it caused quite a few lows for her until she made adjustments to her pump settings. I've heard that a lot when you go to Europe, especially with pasta, right? It's a lot less sugar in it. Oh boy. All right, so she goes on to say, it was very nerve-wracking at first to think about her being so far away from her known support system if something were to go wrong, but she educated a whole new group of friends. Did she run higher than I would have liked? Yes, but I'll take it if it means she was able to confidently live out her dreams without allowing T1D to get in her way. That's a victory for me, says Laura. Thank you so much, Laura, for that update. I love that attitude. And I love that you admitted to being super nervous and worried. I think sometimes people feel like if we're letting our kids do these things, we're not thinking about them, we're not worried about them. No, we let them do it, and we're scared anyway. Oh boy. Well, I hope that Hannah has a fantastic senior year, and I'm so glad she had a great time in Italy. Up next, I want to talk about wins and fails, and this is actually two sides of the same story. One of the things we love most about the Dexcom G6 is that it helped Benny become more independent, but maybe not in exactly the way that you think. I mean, remote monitoring using Share and Follow let us feel a lot more confident letting him do much more away from home with friends or at camp, but just the design change of the G6, remember that? Meant Benny could use one hand to insert the sensor. He was 14 at the time, and he really didn't want our help anymore. It was perfect timing. Dexcom G7 is even more simple to use and gives effortless diabetes management that fits into your lifestyle without the disruptions. Ease of use helps everybody. I'm so grateful the Dexcom product designers kept that in mind with the G7. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. Back now with wins and fails. I started this a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to try to do it every other week, talking about what has happened in the news or in our lives that is good or not so great. My win and my fail this week are the same story, just kind of depending on how you tell it. So let me tell you the win part. As I've mentioned before, many of you know I admin a very large Facebook group in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. We've kind of expanded to the point where we have parents all over the state of North Carolina and in South Carolina as well, because it's a really engaged group. And the purpose of the group, when I started it 10 years ago, was to meet in person and help each other locally in ways that, big national Facebook groups could not. We help each other with babysitters. We help each other talking about doctors. We do meetups. And maybe most importantly, we help each other with physical supplies, right? You need some insulin. I'm going to drive it to you. You need an infusion set. Sarah down the block from you has it. Charlotte is a very big city, but we cover a lot of ground because we have a lot of people. So a couple of nights ago, it was about 9:00 at night, a mom posted that she needed pen needles. Her teenage son, who only does injections, had run out, like a lot of teens will do. They're in this weird in-between time where the kid is pretty much managing independently, but isn't really ready to do everything themselves. And you realize that because you take out a box of, Dexcom sensors and it's empty. Or, you reach for the box of pen needles and it's empty, but it looks like it's full, or maybe it's up in their room. I didn't ask about their circumstances because it's not for me to judge. That happens to everybody. So I messaged her and I said, do you have one? Which she did. And my advice was, and FDA and doctors don't listen, was just use it a couple times, clean it really well in between, but get through the night. She had a prescription order she had said was going to go through the next day, but she needed to get through the night. And she texted back to me, they had Lantus and Humalog. So they really needed 2 pens. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, and this is exactly what Benny would have done. He would have used it for one pen and taken it off and put it on the other pen and then put it back on the other pen. I know, right? We're all cringing, but that's what some people would have done. She was not in the mindset to do that, and her mindset was the proper one. So she posted in the group, I'm about an hour away from where this woman lives. I have 5 bajillion pen needles. So I told her, if you can't find somebody, we'll meet halfway. 15 minutes later, somebody in the group lives 5 minutes from her. They meet up, all is well, no problem. That's a win, right? I love it when we're helping each other. It's just so great to know that somebody's got your back, that, she knows too. She's not the only person whose teenager has done this. Everybody gets a good night's sleep. I didn't have to drive half an hour at 10:00 at night, and we all move on from there. Here's the fail. Why did we have to do this in the first place? Why can she not, A, get her prescription filled at a 24-hour pharmacy? I didn't ask her, but probably because around here they are few and far between. Maybe her prescription wasn't at that kind of pharmacy. I don't know. But more importantly, why can't she just pick up a box of pen needles? Why can't there be, if it's not over the counter, why can't there be a standing order for something like this? For basic stuff for diabetes. This has always driven me batty. We have standing orders for all sorts of things, right? This is how you can get a vaccine at CVS without a prescription from your doctor, because they have standing orders there to assess you and say, okay, you can get this shot today. We have a standing order in North Carolina for glucagon. I know not every state has that, but we do. Why can I get glucagon, but I can't get a pen needle or a syringe? To me, this makes absolutely no sense. Does your state have a standing order for anything like this? You would think that when you get a prescription for insulin, it would come with a standing order. This person has a prescription for insulin vials. There's a standing order for syringes. This person has a prescription for insulin pens. There's a standing order for pen needles. Well, it doesn't work that way. And so that's my fail for the week. Am I missing something? Let me know. You can email me, Stacy@diabetes-connections.com. Okay, before I let you go, can't leave without talking about Mom's Night Out. Registration is open for all 3 cities. Early bird specials will be ending soon. It ends on different dates for different cities. So Frisco, Dallas, that early bird special ends first. That will be done in the middle of August. So get your tickets now for Mom's Night Out. Much more information at diabetes-connections.com. You can get on an email list just for that. And don't miss any announcements, but we are closing in on our first deadline, which is that early bird special. I can't believe it's going to be here before we know it. Thank you, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.